My name is Serena Gonzalez Gutierrez, and I am one of the council members at large representing the whole city of Denver. So, no matter where you live in the city and county of Denver, whether you live over here in Westwood, or you live in Mount Bello, or you live in the north side, I am one of your council members at large. Before we fully get into things, I want to acknowledge today as Indigenous Peoples Day. The city and county of Denver passed, I was part of the group that passed the ordinance, the city ordinance, to create a actual paid city holiday to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day, which has been something historically that we have been trying to do and that our community has been fighting for decades, before I was even born. And so it's very lovely that we get to celebrate that and sit in this moment and also acknowledge not only the land that we stand on as stolen land of the various tribes, but also that we have to work and take action to break down the systemic barriers that have been put in place for generations and hundreds of years. So with that said, I want to thank you all for attending this evening and welcome you to this Latino Community Forum. Tonight we are coming together not only to learn and listen, but to also engage in a discussion about an important topic: police oversight and accountability. We know that this is important because our voters have voted at different times in the last 20 years to have accountability for the police through an independent group not associated with the police. So a couple of those examples were in 2004, the Citizen Oversight Board and the Office of the Independent Monitor were created as a response to distrust in the police, especially from communities of color. Over the past 20 years, the Community Oversight Board and the Office of Independent Monitor have repeatedly been strengthened in their ability to oversee the police and jails and their independence from politics, including ballot measures that were passed in 2016 and in 2021. In 2016, the measure that was put forward was to make sure that the Office of the Independent Monitor lived in city charter. The difference between city charter and ordinance, where it was living, ordinance is something that can be changed by a council member. It can be taken off the books very easily. Through city charter, it can only be modified at the will of the voters, and only if it gets on the ballot, that the voters can decide whether or not they wanted to dismantle the Office of the Independent Monitor or wanted to make changes to it. The other bigger change was in 2021 that made the Independent Monitor no longer a mayoral appointee, and instead they are chosen by and reports to the Citizen Oversight Board. And we're going to be hearing from some of these folks here in a few moments. That's a huge issue, right? When you think about the fact that where the Independent Monitor was living prior to reported to the mayor. So does our police department. So does our chief, our sheriff. And so that's important to have that separation of, and have that kind of independence. All of these actions on the part of the Denver public show the commitment that we share towards building a safer and more fair and just society for all who live here in Denver. The three speakers here tonight bring their experience, knowledge, and dedication to the issue of police oversight, accountability, and of course, public safety, community safety. We welcome your comments and questions at the end after Chief Thomas speaks, and we know that accountability for police is not just something written in a manual or policy, but it is a promise that every person who interacts with our public safety personnel will be treated with respect, dignity, and fairness. I want to recognize, I see at least one person here tonight that I just want to note is joining us, and that is Sheriff Wiggins. Thank you for being here tonight, so I just want to recognize him. We want to thank some of our partners in putting this forum together: the Citizen Oversight Board, the weekly issue El Seminario, the Office of Independent Monitor, the Denver Police Department, the Latino Action Council, Denver Healing Generations, and the Community Oversight Board Community Engagement Committee. And lastly, of course, the Westwood Community Center for giving us this space and allowing us to utilize this space tonight. So thank you so much. If you're from one of those organizations, if you members. And then after we go through introductions, we'll have each of them talk about what their roles are for the respective parts that they play. And then we'll go to questions from the audience, okay? Right now, we're not doing any timing. However, if I notice that somebody might be taking up a little bit of space, I might interrupt you kindly and ask if we could, get to somebody else. I always like to lead by the rule of, if you feel like you're taking up a lot of space, then maybe take a step back yourself and give somebody else an opportunity. Allow a little bit of space for somebody else to maybe raise their hand or have a question. So, with that said, we'll start with Julia Richmond, the chair of the Citizen Oversight Board. Julia has a long history of working in complex organizations, overseeing large-scale changes. She was named as a 2022 Denver Business Journal Outstanding Women in Business winner, as well as a Colorado Governor's Fellow and graduate of the Leadership Denver. Born and raised in Colorado, Julia is committed to our community. She chairs the City of Denver Oversight Board and serves on the board of the Colfax Marathon. Professionally, Julia currently serves as the Chief Government Relations and Partnerships Officer for the GovTech AI company, CivCheck. Prior to that, she was with the University of Denver as the Senior Vice Chancellor for Operations and Strategy Implementation and the Colorado Governor's Office of Information Technology in 2020 as the Chief Strategy Officer, and later as the Deputy Executive Director. Julia was formerly with the City of Boulder, where she was the Chief Innovation and Technology Officer, as well as the Chief Innovation and Analytics Officer. Julia holds a Master of Public Policy from the Harris School of Public Policy at the University of Chicago and a BA from Dartmouth College. Welcome, Julia. Thank you for being here. The next person beside Julia is Elizabeth Perez Castle, Officer of the Independent Monitor. We call her the Independent Monitor. The Monitor. Liz, also goes by Liz, was appointed as Denver's Independent Monitor in January of 2023. She grew up the daughter of Cuban immigrants in New York City. Liz is not only the first woman to hold this position, but also the first Independent Monitor of Hispanic descent. Before her appointment, she worked with the Colorado State Public Defender's Office for 12 years, and then established her own private criminal defense practice in Denver in 2000. She was awarded the Chris Miranda Outstanding Hispanic Lawyer Award in 2022 by the Colorado Hispanic Bar Association. Prior to getting her law degree, Liz was a Spanish language court interpreter for Weld County clerks. And while she was a student, she was a police dispatcher for the University of Northern Colorado Police Department. As Independent Monitor, Liz provides independent civilian oversight of all investigations of alleged misconduct of the approximately 2,600 sworn police officers and sheriff deputies in the city and county of Denver. Liz received her law degree from the University of Denver School of Law and a BA, Bachelor's of Arts from the University of Northern Colorado. Thank you, Liz, for being here. Of course, last but not least, is Ron Thomas, Chief of Police, Denver Police Department. A lifelong Denver native, Chief Ron Thomas began his career in law enforcement as a Denver Department of Safety cadet. Shortly after graduating from Denver's Thomas Jefferson High School, I don't know. Okay. I'm sorry. I know I'm on the west side, but I am a north side.
We've never been good at softball.
That's not true, but sorry, I'll get back to it. In 1989, Chief Thomas joined the Denver Police Department, continuing a family tradition of public service to the Denver community. Since then, Chief Thomas has held numerous assignments, which include assignments as Commander of Police District 2, Police District 5, and the Internal Affairs Division. In 2018, Chief Thomas was selected as the Division Chief of Patrol, where he served until his appointment by then Denver Mayor Michael B. Hancock as Chief of Police for the Denver Police Department in 2022. Chief Thomas was reappointed under Mayor Mike Johnston in 2024. Under Chief Thomas's leadership, the Denver Police Department has made significant strides in keeping the Denver community safe. His priorities include lowering crime, improving response times, and increasing trust. To increase transparency, he launched public dashboards that provide access to crime statistics, response times, and internal affairs information. He has also made strides in community outreach by providing targeted information to the Spanish-speaking community. These initiatives reflect Chief Thomas's commitment to a safer and more transparent Denver. Chief Thomas graduated summa cum laude from Columbia Southern University and completed postgraduate study at the Naval Postgraduate School, the FBI National Academy, Northwestern University Command College, and the Senior Management Institute for Police. Welcome, Chief Thomas. Okay, well, thank you all so much for being here. And so we're going to go ahead and start with a brief presentation from each of our presenters here. And we'll start with Julia, and then we'll move on to the independent monitor.
I feel like I have to stand up since you were standing up.
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, thank you all for being here tonight. It was really important to the Citizen Oversight Board to help organize an event, and thank you to all the partners who helped make that happen. We have an important topic to discuss today, which we have been trying to daylight to the public since really the beginning of this year. I'll get into that in just a second, but just wanted to provide a quick sort of overview about the Citizen Oversight Board for those who are not familiar with it. Is this anybody's first time interacting with the Citizen Oversight Board? Good job. Yay! Okay. So for those who are sort of less familiar, the Citizen Oversight Board has three main responsibilities for the City of Denver. The first is to oversee the Office of the Independent Monitor. So we have the responsibility for hiring, firing, and managing the performance of the monitor and her office. We also interact with the monitor on a regular basis and engage with the topics that the monitor's office is engaged with. Second, we make recommendations on public safety, and so that is primarily regarding the sworn officers, but more broadly, anything in the public safety realm that is of concern to the public or that we see as an opportunity for improvements in terms of policy process or otherwise. Lastly, we have a broad responsibility and accountability to address matters of public concern and community concern. And so issues that may come up are things like breastfeeding in the jail, opioids, access to medical care by folks who are in our custody, treatment of community members at the hands of the police, and more broadly. And so we are a conduit for community concerns and complaints. One can make a complaint to the Citizen Oversight Board, and then we help route that to the appropriate entity, and we are able to sort of help follow and track that. In some cases, we help folks resolve their problems directly, and in other cases, we bring resources to bear or to the attention of community members. So this so this is what I mentioned. In terms of the recommendations to public safety, I'll just highlight a couple of things. We're able to make both policy level and case-specific recommendations. So case-specific would be Julia had an interaction with the police department that didn't go as she would have imagined, and so I have this case that's pending. Can the Citizen Oversight Board help with that? More broadly, we have the ability to interact on a policy level, and that's really what brings us here with you all today. So part of the work that we do on an ongoing basis as a board, and we meet very regularly. We meet every other week, and the first and third Fridays of the month. Those meetings are all public, and so you are always welcome to participate. You could bring your concerns to those meetings. You could ask us to address something in those meetings, but the point is that we are broadly representing the community in our oversight of the departments. So in terms of policy level recommendations, education-based development has been something that the board has engaged significantly on since we found out about it at the end of last year. The board has taken a very strong position on this topic for a number of reasons. One, we are always interested in improving the disciplinary processes for the police department, for the sheriff's department, and those that we oversee in the fire department, and feel that this is not a sufficient way of doing that we haven't really gotten at the root issue of the process concerns, and that we are not really doing this in a way that benefits either the community or transparency and accountability. And so that is something that we wanted to bring to you today, and of course our speakers will discuss with you those topics. I wanted to highlight a couple of other things that the board has been engaged on this year. So we uncovered in 2023 some issues surrounding lawsuits that folks had against the city. And sometimes those lawsuits, where they regard public safety, include sort of non-monetary settlements. And so what that means is, you might sue the city because you were harmed in an interaction with the police department, and that has a monetary settlement, but it also means that there's some training that needs to be done for the police department as a result of your interaction, because it turns out that maybe is a systems issue or something that happens to other people as well, and we want to prevent that from happening again. And so as a result of work that we did to uncover this issue and to work with council to develop some language, that will be going in front of the voters in November, or it's already been, I can't remember what the next step is in terms of the charter.
It's done.
Sorry?
It's ordinance.
It's done. It's ordinance. Okay, yes, thank you. So, thank you. I was like, having a brain fart.
Nothing more to vote on.
City Council passed an ordinance that now allows for better oversight and transparency into those non-monetary settlements, which provides a great deal of relief, at least to the Citizen Oversight Board, in terms of what the city's accountability is in response to these sort of painful incidents that often happen. Sometimes, the death of a loved one or significant harm. So we feel really proud of that work this year. We've also been engaged on a more significant strategic planning effort, and that strategic plan is available on our website, and so you can learn more about the work that we're engaging in and pursuing more significantly in the future. One of the things that we're committed to is better public engagement. The work that we do can often be sort of particular and heady and use language that's not necessarily that accessible to folks, and so we are committed to engaging with the community more often and more robustly, and so this is, I think, a good representation of that effort, and thank you to the Community Engagement Committee for helping put this on. I'm happy to answer questions at the end of our conversation here, but just wanted to provide you an overview of what we're up to on the Citizen Oversight Board. Oh, lastly, if you are a member of the Citizen Oversight Board and you're here, could you raise your hand? I think we've got 5 or 6 folks. And so at the end of the forum today, if you want to engage with our board members, please do so, and thank you all for your participation.
Thank you so much, Julia. You can clap. A couple of things I just want to note is that, this is being put on as kind of a foundational, informational, right? We're learning, some of us are learning about some of these entities for the first time. Some of us have been aware of them for a long time. And so whatever your questions are, even if it's like, when does the COB meet? When does the Citizen Oversight Board meet? What do you do? If you want more details, please ask those questions. It's meant for audiences of all types. Those who are very familiar and want to ask very specific questions, like, as Julia mentioned, the education-based development policy that's being proposed right now, or you just want to know more information about what it is that they do. I will just point out before we go further, to make sure you did a great job, acronyms. A lot of us utilize it in our work, utilize them in our work, and so I just want to make sure our presenters know if you are using acronyms to try to spell those out as well, just because other folks might not be familiar with them. With that said, I'll turn it over to the independent monitor, Castle, to try to discuss it.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight on our Indigenous Peoples Day. Buenas noches a todos. Gracias por venir esta noche y estar presentes con nosotros. My name is Elizabeth Perez Castle. As was indicated before, you took the first 5 minutes of my statement. I was appointed the Independent Monitor in January of 2023. The head of the Independent Monitor's office, that position was open for 2 years after Nick Mitchell, who many of you know, left the office of the Independent Monitor at the end of 2020. So a lot of time passed before that position was filled, and been playing catch up since then, and I'm happy to be with you tonight and kind of fill you in a little bit. The Office of the Independent Monitor reviews complaints and commendations that come in to us, and we are a civilian agency. So what that means is we are not part of the police department, and although we work for the city and county of Denver, we are an independent agency. The purpose of having an independent agency have eyes on complaints, and not as much commendations and complaints, is based upon kind of a community cry, a community demand in, I believe it was approximately 2003, 2004, is at least 2003, after the killing of a young man by the name of Paul Childs, who was killed at the hands of a Denver police officer. That was kind of a spark and the catalyst, but there have been many other incidents like that in which finally the community came together and said, no, you know what, our trust with the department is broken. We need to know that someone is watching out for our interests and can provide a can have eyes on it. In order for us to trust that our complaints are being heard, that there is accountability, we need an independent agency. So the Office of the Independent Monitor came into being I believe the ordinance was in 2004. We opened our doors in 2005. This makes our 20th year as an agency It is remarkable. It is remarkable for a few reasons. It's because it is a community-generated body. You made this happen. You insisted on it happening, and you have continued to support that over the last 20 years. And we couldn't address the issues within the departments and have the strength that we have if it's not for community voices. What we provide is the ability for community members to have trust that at least their complaints are being heard and that they are being seen. Because to have trust in the department, you need accountability and you need transparency. We are part of that transparency. So over the last 20 years, the OIM has an Office of the Independent Monitor. You'll hear us mention as Office of the Independent Monitor quite often. We have received multiple accolades, awards, have been identified by President Obama as the model for a good oversight system, and we have been referred to as the gold standard of oversight. We have issued reports throughout the years, not just our annual reports, but reports specific to incidents that have occurred. George Floyd, Michael Marshall are just some examples. To give you a little background on exactly what we do. First of all, as I'm in the job about 3 years now, a lot of people don't know what we do. We do not investigate cases. What we do is make recommendations. So the department will do the investigation. Complaint comes through, we have eyes on it from the moment it comes through to the moment it is done. The departments will do the investigation. We will make recommendations as to what the investigation should look like. If it needs more information, if it's good to go. Once we certify that investigation is thorough and complete, it moves on to the discipline level. Then at the discipline level, again, it will be reviewed by the department. They will apply the facts to the policies to determine if there was a violation. We will also weigh in and give our opinion as to whether there is a violation and what, if any, discipline there should be. So we don't impose discipline. Eventually, those recommendations, both those of the independent monitor and the department, whether it be the sheriff's department or the police department, go to the director of safety. The director of safety makes the ultimate decision as to what the discipline will be. We issue reports to the community twice a year. We issue an annual report on March 15th of every year that covers statistics about discipline over the entire year prior. We also issue a semi-annual report that usually comes out in October. We anticipate this year's semi-annual report will come out the end of October that covers the first 6 months of the year. In addition to that, we have a policy team consisting of 3 PhDs who look at all the data that we receive from the departments, review it, and can make recommendations about policy, training, issues that need to be looked at, patterns, anything that we can flag that identifies either a conversation or publication to the community. So that's essentially what we do. I'm trying to condense it into 15 minutes, and I certainly am happy to answer any questions you have. At the end of the evening, if your question wasn't asked or answered, I will be here and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Oh, wait, I have 2 more minutes. Okay. So, yeah, a lot of folks ask, well, what power does the Office of the Independent Monitor have if you cannot impose discipline? And so one of the things I like to explain is, if we were to be in charge of imposing discipline, then there would need to be another body to review our determination about what the discipline is. So we can escalate levels of oversight. This system has worked and has, like I stated, it is a gold model nationally, internationally, because of the fact that we are able to report to the community, we are able to give information to the community without talking about specific names of officers, and we do that because the ordinance says we can't publish the names of the individual officers, and we can get into a conversation about that. But as I stated, 20 years. For 20 years, the Office of the Independent Monitor has been publishing reports, giving information to the community, and is a success because you made it happen. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Monitor Castle. Next, we'll have Chief Thomas give us a brief overview of, you can talk about some of the policies, things that you have done in your time as chief.
Well, first, thank you all for coming. This is important engagement. I want to thank Dina especially because she's the one who invited me, and I think kind of initiated this engagement. So I certainly appreciate the opportunity. As was introduced, I'm the chief of police, so obviously I'm responsible for the overall management and oversight of the police department. Also, you heard kind of how I elevated to the position of this department, and heard that I was once the commander of internal affairs. There's kind of a story that comes with that. So, prior to being asked to be the commander of the Internal Affairs Bureau, I was actually commanding our Special Operations Bureau. So I managed our fugitive team and some other high-profile investigative units. And I remember being asked to take over internal affairs, and literally without hesitation, I said yes. I mean, I knew that when wouldn't necessarily be as fun as chasing around fugitives, but I thought it was an important thing. And I had convinced myself at the time that I was leading fugitive and special investigations that I was providing the most valuable service to the citizens of Denver because I was taking violent criminals off the street every day. And then I got to internal affairs and I recognized that actually now I have the most important job to the community. Because, the truth is that everybody doesn't have an engagement with the violent criminal. Very few people, thankfully, have that unfortunate incidents. But, just about everybody has an engagement with a police officer, and a lot of times those engagements don't go the way they should. And so I felt that I had that responsibility of, disciplining people when those engagements didn't go the way that they should, and trying to get them to understand how they are to engage with the community. So I really want to appreciate that opportunity, and I think it could build a foundation for me as I serve as chief of police. Some other things that I sort of identified, while working in internal affairs was that a lot of our misconduct that officers would engage in is essentially low level. And when I say low level, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a significant impact on our community. What I mean is that like the outcome as determined by the matrix was likely to be an oral written reprimand, maybe a slight fine of time, but no suspensions, no terminations, anything like that. Understood that that it is important to hold people significantly accountable, especially if they do something significant to our community. It is important, and took very seriously the responsibility to walk people out the door when they demonstrate that they don't belong here, to deserve kind of an opportunity to serve the community. But as I kind of looked at the process, having left internal affairs and having even greater opportunities oversight over the entire police department, I recognized that there were some challenges with our current disciplinary process. And one of them is that, particularly for those low-level infractions, they were not, the outcomes were not very solution-oriented. And also, to get to those outcomes, it took a significant period of time to do that. So, sometimes 6, 8, 9 months to resolve a complaint that ultimately resulted in an officer getting, some notation in their official file or something like that. And so I began thinking about a year or so ago that we needed to change that process. And so let me talk about the education-based development process by beginning to talk about what it's not. And so it is not an attempt to erode or undermine the current discipline process. It's not an attempt to eliminate oversight from the disciplinary process. It's not an attempt to bypass the investigative process or sacrifice thoroughness for timeliness. And it's not an attempt to allow officers a freebie. What it is an alternative to low-level infractions, an opportunity to have a more solution-oriented outcome, and a way to better train officers to avoid policy violations by addressing underlying root causes, and really an opportunity to employ a more intentional formal process to an informal process that has existed since the beginning. And so, right now we have the opportunity to have a formal investigation, and then for some of the very same infractions that would go through a formal process, we actually have an informal process where likely the only outcome is like a journal entry or some training or something like that. And the problem that I find with that is that once it leaves internal affairs, we lose control over it. There's no consistency, and so I think that if we handle those incidents in a more formal manner, we can instill some consistency. I can make sure that that everybody's given the same journal entry, everybody's given the same training instead of, a district deciding how to address a particular situation. And so I can talk about the mechanics a little bit of the alternatives to discipline process. The first thing that happens, so there's actually very little change to the existing process. So a complaint is filed, it's either received by our office or the Office of the Independent Monitor or the Citizen Oversight Board. It is then assigned to an investigator who investigates that complaint thoroughly. Regardless of how serious it is, regardless of what the likely outcome is, it is investigated thoroughly and then given to the Office of the Independent Monitor, who will then certify that investigation as thorough and complete. And so that will never change. What I am proposing as a change is if it is a eligible offense, and so I want to, I've got documentation that's on our website. There are 115 specifications that could be held against an officer, and of those 115, 75 of them, so 65%, right off the bat are ineligible for consideration. So, various integrity complaints, complaints relative to use of force, bias-related complaints. There are a number of complaints that are off the table right off the bat. The other thing that's off the table are repeated offenses that could be determined to be part of some sort of a pattern. Those are things that we're not going to consider for education-based development. Now, if it is one of those offenses that's not ineligible, if it is not part of, it's not a repeat offense, not part of a pattern of conduct, then there's I think another determination that is made, and that is, I can't think of a better way to really reference it other than to say, is it a mistake of the head or a mistake of the heart? Is this intentional misconduct where they knew the right thing to do and yet they did the wrong thing anyway, because that would make it ineligible, or is this, they simply didn't understand what the policy is and that's why they did the wrong thing in that particular instance. Now, those specific violations, I would propose to offer them the opportunity to go through education-based development, and so they would be given the offer to go through some education. As by accepting that offer, they are essentially acknowledging that they did something wrong and taking accountability by allowing themselves to be trained and educated on not just what the community expectation is, but what the department expectation is, so that they don't engage in that kind of conduct again. And then obviously if they do, then that again would not be eligible for further education-based development. Again, happy to answer any questions. I think to me the most important things to take away are, this does not take away the opportunity for oversight. This does not, I think, tear down the existing disciplinary process. I think this just provides an opportunity to deal with those incidents that have been deemed very low level in a more intentional way, a more solution-oriented way. And I think the additional benefit to that is we can process those much more quickly. So what happens now is there's an investigative process. It goes to the Office of the Independent Monitor for them to deem that it's thorough and complete. And then there's kind of a back and forth between our conduct review office and the Office of the Independent Monitor before ultimately it lands in a conduct review hearing, where ultimately the appropriate penalty is decided. And so what happens with most of these cases where the outcome is likely to be an oral written reprimand, maybe the fine of a day or two, go to the back of a very long line, and so it takes a considerable amount of time to process these cases and ultimately come to a resolution. I think that does a disservice to the community. I think it does a disservice to the officer. I think that it could instill distrust because, people are thinking, well, my goodness, what is taking so long to, the facts seem clear. What's taking so long for the department to acknowledge that this officer did something wrong and hold him accountable? And so I think that it would be a good service to the community to reach out to those community members that have been harmed by an officer. Let them know much earlier that, listen, this officer has acknowledged that they did the wrong thing, and they are going to be held accountable. They're going to be given specific training so that they clearly understand what our expectation is as an agency and what the expectation is of the community. And I think that is a much better, a much more solution-oriented outcome than just putting a negative notation in someone's personnel file.